Engineering goes back further than you think. From the pyramids to farming, ancient civilizations were busy finding practical and surprisingly sophisticated answers to day-to-day problems. I'm Mike with List 25, and here are 25 times ancient engineering blew our minds. But before we begin, it would blow my mind if you could like, share, comment, and subscribe with that notification bell, because it really helps the channel grow. With that being said, let's go. 25. Electric-free climate control farms. Do you need electricity for a climate-controlled farm? Not according to the ancient Incas, who did it all the old-fashioned way. They grew maize, potatoes, and quinoa in the Andes, something that doesn't seem possible even today. So how did they do it? The Incas built terraced fields at different heights, which helped them regulate the temperature for each plant. These elevations also controlled sunlight and exposure to moisture, giving each crop the perfect microclimate. Their terrace arrangement featured stone walls, which provided an additional source of heat. The walls absorbed heat from the sun through the day, then released it to the plants once things had cooled down at night. 24. Water on Machu Picchu. At 2,430 meters above sea level, Machu Picchu is an out-of-the-way destination. That meant the Incas who lived there needed to think big when it came to their water supply. Being on the slope of a mountain helped with water flowing downwards, but how would they control the source and distribute it among the population on a mass scale? The answer is a system of stone channels, which took water from a spring and directed it toward a series of drinking fountains. These fountains were positioned on stairways, working with the natural flow. How did the Incas stop the water from getting contaminated? They decided to let the water travel underground, with approximately half of the network below the surface. You also had a drainage system down there to cope with heavy rains and potential water erosion. Up to 1,000 people relied on the water for refreshment and other purposes. It's a testament to this ancient form of engineering. The principle still works, hundreds of years later. 23. One temple from one rock. An entire temple structure carved from one rock? Amazingly, this feat was achieved by the Rashtrakuta dynasty, who created the Kailasa temple in a rock face around 1,250 years ago. It's the single largest monolithic structure on the planet, and it gets its name from the home of Shiva, the god who lived on the legendary Mount Kailash. Laborers faced the mammoth task of cutting out thousands of tons of basalt, a volcanic rock. To preserve the integrity of the structure, they started at the top and carved down, so the base of the temple was completed last. Given the complexity of the design inside and out, this was an enormous task. It's safe to say, the effort paid off. Centuries later, it stands proudly, having resisted natural disasters such as monsoons, not to mention rampaging warriors coming and going. 22. Ancient irrigation. Who knew a pole in a bucket could have a powerful effect on irrigation? I'm talking about the shaduf, an ancient technology that looks pretty basic by today's standards, but which still gets used in the 21st century. The shaduf was introduced around 5,000 years ago and works essentially as a lever. There's a weight on one end of the pole and a bucket on the other. The pole itself rests on a crossbeam. The bucket is positioned over a water source, and the user works the pole to dunk the bucket in the water. So really, it takes the strain off someone wanting to fill lots of buckets, which are then tipped into irrigation channels. First operated in ancient Egypt and possibly Mesopotamia, the shaduf brought agriculture to dry and dusty deserts, making it a game changer for plant growers. 21. Desert Fortress. Built in the 1st century BCE, Masada Fortress is a site of great significance to the Jewish people. Constructed on the orders of King Herod the Great, it was carved into a high plateau of limestone, chalk, and dolomite. And when I say high, I am not kidding. You'll find the fortress approximately 434 meters above the Dead Sea. The location also overlooks the Judean desert. It was a formidable post to fight from, only accessible through narrow pathways in the rock. However, its true importance lies in the connection to ancient Jewish history. Here, the Sicarii, a faction of assassins and rebels against Roman rule, made a base where they spent months fending off the enemy soldiers. In order to breach the fortress walls, the Romans had to build a ramp to reach the plateau, a major feat of ancient engineering itself. They got into Masada in 73 CE, but the Sicarii had taken their own lives, according to historical accounts. 20. Byzantine defense system. Constantinople was the capital of the ancient Byzantine Empire, so it needed a pretty hardcore defense system to put off any attackers. Well, now it's Istanbul, not Constantinople. It's been a long time gone, Constantinople. Now it's a Turkish delight on a moonlit night. Anyway, Emperor Theodosius II ordered the construction of a series of walls running for around 6.5 kilometers called the Theodosian Walls. The idea was to create a triple threat, where 2 walls and a moat stood between the city and its enemies. The inner wall was over 12 meters high and 5 meters wide. Beyond that lay an outer wall, then the moat, which had its own wall for extra security. If you wanted to get past all that, you'd be doing so under fire. The Theodosian walls were equipped with towers, from which troops shot arrows and other projectiles. 5th century engineering has rarely been more intimidating. 19. Lion Gates. What better way of showing people you mean business than building gates with lions sculpted on the outside? These are the Hittite lion gates, used by that civilization from around the 14th to 13th century BCE. They were designed as part of heavy stone fortifications which rose up around Hittite cities to keep the invaders out. The walls were constructed using a technique called polygonal masonry. This avoided mortar, instead relying on precise cuts so everything could be slid into place. Meanwhile, the lions kept watch around the entrances. They weren't real, of course, but some of these sculptures were crafted to show the entire beast in 3 dimensions. You can't help but feel uneasy just looking at those things, never mind passing them on your way through the gates. 18. Earthquake-proof pyramids. Pyramids are pretty impressive structures to begin with, but these ones were built to handle earthquakes. They were the genius idea of the Norte Chico civilization who lived in Peru approximately 5,000 years ago. How did they do it? They filled the center of the pyramid with stone-filled bags, a technique known as shikra. The stones are rock solid and the plant-based bags flex under pressure, making them ideal shock absorbers. Shikra helped the Norte Chico stabilize their pyramids while at the same time providing much-needed wiggle room. We don't know much about how ancient peoples such as the Egyptians built the pyramids, so it's good to get some details from other cultures. 17. Ancient observatories. In an age before telescopes, ancient civilizations made giant instruments to study the stars. The Jantar Mantar observatories date back to India in the 18th century. Jantar Mantar translates into English as calculating instrument, and these structures held some remarkable equipment. Created under the reign of astronomer king Maharaja Jai Singh II, there were 22 instruments in total, made from masonry and metal. Housed inside separate buildings, they measured time and altitude, plus the sun's movements through a large sundial. This groundbreaking project made astronomy more understandable and delivered precise results for the star-loving monarch. No magnification? No problem. 16. Rolling fortresses. We think of fortresses as big, immovable structures that sit there waiting to be invaded. That's not the case with the rolling fortresses of the Hellenistic people. They lived in Greece, Egypt, Central Asia, and India, so they had a lot of ground to cover. Taking the form of siege towers, these wooden fortresses traveled on wheels for convenience of conquest. If you encountered one of these things, you needed to run, unless you wanted an arrow shot at you. The towers also featured catapults as well as different levels inside for people to position themselves in. How big were these fortresses? Well, in the case of the mighty Heliopolis, it was over 39 meters tall and 19 meters wide. The exterior was reportedly covered in iron and animal skins, and it took hundreds of soldiers to push it along. That had to be a tough gig, right? 15. Rock water gardens. Hydraulics were part of the ancient world? In Sri Lanka, Sigiriya rock water gardens provided water for fountains, moats, and ponds. Built on the orders of King Kashyapa around the 5th century CE, it used underground canals, terracotta pipes, and cisterns, or receptacles, combined with water pressure and gravity. This systematically laid out system gave people refreshment and drainage in a hot and dry environment. It's another example of how ancient people made the seemingly impossible possible. 14. Mortuary temple. Hatshepsut was a female pharaoh who ruled between 1473 and 1458 BCE, which is interesting because we tend to think of Egyptian pharaohs as men. One of her most impressive achievements was the mortuary temple at the Deir el-Bahari desert complex. It was built from limestone, but instead of getting the stone from a cliff, they just carved the structure into the cliff itself. The three-story design celebrated the pharaoh's life, with the name mortuary temple coming from the mortuary cult, which gave offerings in her honor. When Hatshepsut passed away, her legend lived on within this mind-blowing structure. As with any temple, there's a deep religious connection, in this case with Amun, the creator god. 13. Volcanic heads. You probably recognized our next example of ancient engineering, as it's one of the planet's most famous landmarks. These are the Moai, stone figures created from volcanic rock on Easter Island. However, we only see their heads sticking out of the ground. Interestingly, those heads are much bigger than the bodies, a feature that adds to the overall puzzle of what they're doing there. The figures are generally mysterious, though we do know they were made by the Rapa Nui people between 1250 and 1500. We think the figures were carved to commemorate departed ancestors, linking the older generations to the new in a powerful bond. The figures, of which there are over 900, are close to 4 meters high on average, and weigh a backbreaking 14 tons. Apart from these details, we know frustratingly little about them. For example, how did these enormous pieces of rock get transported to their location in the first place? Like the Egyptian pyramids? That's a question we may never know the answer to. 12. Ancient vending machine. Ancient Greek engineer Hero had an appropriate name. He invented some time-saving machines to make people's lives better. One of those is pretty surprising. He's responsible for the earliest known vending machine, which provided water for thirsty worshippers in temples. Like today's invention, it was coin-operated, with the mechanism relying on the coin's weight to activate a lever. The lever would in turn operate a valve which opened and released water. Not just any old water either, but holy water. The ancient vending machine design enabled it to release controlled amounts of sacred refreshment, and the money came in handy for the religious institution also. This wasn't the most exciting thing Hero ever invented, but it was one of the most practical, and the basic idea is still in use today. 11. Manhattan of the desert. High-rises in the desert? It isn't just a modern thing. Back in the 16th century, a place called Shibam in Yemen was hosting structures made from mudbrick. This ancient building material was created using a mixture of clay and straw or dung. The mixture would be fashioned in a brick form and then dried. Because the structures were as tall as 11 stories, they've been compared to skyscrapers by today's standards. Another striking thing is the number of buildings. It's believed there were hundreds of them, which is where the location gets its nickname, Manhattan of the Desert. It was part city, part fortress, with a sophisticated design that used shade to keep the inhabitants cool and safe from enemy attack. Not bad for something made almost entirely of mud. What do you make of all these incredible feats of engineering? Maybe you're an engineer and you have some views, or you just want to let us know what you think. If so, please do so. Let us know. Our comment section is always open. 10. World's first bathhouse. This 4,000-year-old bathhouse is well designed, and more importantly, watertight. It's the Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro, found in Pakistan, and it was built by the Indus Valley Civilization. Mohenjo-Daro was their urban center. The oldest structure of its kind, it was approximately 12 meters long and 7 meters wide. The Great Bath used bricks and tar to create a sacred space with steps on either side that would take you down into the pool, which was 2.4 meters deep. Water for the pool came from local wells, and once bathing took place, the dirty stuff was drained away. The place combined worship and hygiene in a way that hadn't been done before, at least not as far as we know. It's one of the world's oldest public water tanks. 9. Ancient stepwell. In case you don't know what a stepwell is, it's a staircase built into the ground from which people can access an underground water source. This one, called Chanbaori, is in India. It was constructed in approximately the 9th century CE under the Nikum dynasty. The staircase here goes down 30 meters and features an astonishing 3,500 steps over 13 levels. It isn't just a practical thing. It's also visually striking, as the stairways run past each other, creating a pattern. The purpose behind the Chanbaori stepwell was to serve the community, giving them water but offering them a meeting place to pick up some refreshment and shoot the breeze. It was about the only breeze they were ever going to get, being out in a scorching hot desert. 8. Van Fortress. Overlooking Lake Van in Turkey is the formidable Van Fortress, a castle-type structure made from stone and mud brick that's been there for thousands of years. It was a product of the Urartian civilization, whose kingdom lasted from the 9th till the 6th century BCE. Like many ancient fortresses, it was built high up, making it difficult for any opponents to reach, and was also in a strategic position. The Yuan fortress ran along a ridge and went on for a kilometer, so this wasn't a small place by any means. What was inside the mighty structure? The castle was designed for both military and political reasons, so soldiers would rub shoulders with politicians and administrators. This being the ancient world, the gods and goddesses played a big role too, with temples available for those who wanted to say a few prayers among all the swords and paperwork. Plus, inscriptions have been found, suggesting the place was in use beyond the time of the Urartians. While we see it as something from a bygone era today, it was clearly occupied for a long time before finally falling into disrepair. 7. Guatemalan Pyramid. La Danta is a 236 feet high pyramid in the city of El Mirador in Guatemala. These days, the city is an archaeological site dating back to around the 1st century CE. Its base alone covers 44 acres, and that fact helped La Danta become one of the biggest pyramids on record. At 2.8 million cubic meters, it has a larger overall volume than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Who actually built it? The ancient Mayans worked on the limestone and rubble structure for several hundred years, making it a vast undertaking. The remains of La Danta now show it was connected to other structures, which together formed a large complex. That said, the pyramid itself was pretty important. It has a temple at the top where various rituals and ceremonies were probably held. 6. The Treasury. It's called the Treasury, but this sandstone cliff structure is actually a tomb. At least, that's what experts think it might be anyway. The elaborate monument in Petra was possibly carved to honor a powerful figure like a king. The treasury was made by the Nabataean people and stands around 39 meters tall and 25 wide. There's an interesting story behind it also, relating to treasure that was concealed by a pharaoh. Legend has it, the urn on top of the treasury was hiding the place for this treasure, and regular folks would try and get their hands on it. In fact, they used to shoot at the urn to break it open. That's where the slight inaccurate name comes from. This wasn't a treasury in banking terms, but someone was definitely keeping money there. 5. City of Mystery. This ancient Mesoamerican city has a whole lot of mystery. You see, it's empty because the population walked out one day. Or that's how it seems. The abandonment of Teotihuacan near Mexico City happened back in 750, leaving a lot of impressive structures behind for archaeologists to wonder about. There were a couple of pyramids for the sun and moon respectively, plus a place called the Avenue of the Dead. Did the people living there die out? We don't even know who they were for sure. It's possible the Maya set up home there, and others probably used the city also. Interestingly, the Aztecs named it the place where gods were created, so it was seen as a highly significant location. Experts spent 8 years excavating it, and while they didn't have any conclusive answers, they uncovered details that got the world talking. 4. Cave of Secrets. There are cave complexes, and then there's the Ellora Caves in India. This extensive network has 34 caves all carved in the rock of the Charanandri Mountains. The caves contain various temples, and the inhabitants had more than one belief system. You'll find Buddhist, Hindu, and Jain sculptures and features, which come under the broader definition of Dharmic faith. The network goes on for 2 kilometers and includes many fascinating places in its own right. One such place is the Kailasa Temple, which I mentioned earlier, which is the biggest cave of all of them. Work on the Ellora Caves is said to have carried out across 8 centuries, and that's no surprise given their scale and complexity. 3. World's largest Buddhist temple. This awesome stone structure is designed to resemble the cosmos. Borobudur is what's known as a mandala, or building which incorporates shapes and geometric patterns. The mandala consists of 9 raised platforms which rise up. The 6 platforms at the bottom are square and have mounted sculptures which tell stories of the Buddhist religion. Above these are 3 circular platforms which have stupas. These are domes that contain statues of Buddha. Built by the Selendra dynasty, Borobudur is in central Java in Indonesia and dates back to the 8th and 9th centuries CE. This intricate construction took 6 decades to fully realize, and stands as a lasting reminder of the society that made it and a powerful symbol of the Buddhist faith. It was recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1991. 2. Green Table. During the 12th and 13th century, the ancestral Puebloans built homes into the side of the Colorado cliffs. They used sandstone blocks and wooden beams held together with mortar. While a community living inside a cliff sounds precarious, the ancestral Puebloans did all right. Their strange environment provided both protection from the weather and insulation to keep them warm. This fascinating collection of structures is known as Mesa Verde, a Spanish name which translates as Green Table. It didn't actually get that name until the 17th century and the arrival of explorers and colonizers. They figured the plateaus looked like tables of green with their covering of trees. Whoever came up with it, it's a pretty name. Mesa Verde. 1. Emperor's Palace. This incredible piece of engineering was built as a retirement home? Diocletian's palace was intended for the emperor of the same name, who wanted to kick off his sandals and put his feet up in the picturesque setting of Split, a city in Croatia. This wasn't simply a retirement cottage, though. It was a whole palace with space to incorporate military activity. The palace covered approximately 30,000 square meters and had protections such as watchtowers. There was a mausoleum, or tomb, section that was later turned into a cathedral. Everything in this luxury villa/final resting place was designed on an epic scale. Now, I don't mean to throw a wrench into the works, but our ride through awesome ancient engineering is over. But engineering and technology go hand in hand, so you'll want to check out our next video about ancient technologies from vanished empires. You won't believe some of the things we dug up. And as always, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, click that notification bell, and I'll catch you soon for another list. Gonna go make big palaces.